Wave, Thomas. Perfect. All right. Well, thanks for being here, everyone. Before I get started with my speech, I actually just want to show a few visual aids and how they kind of add to the speech, actually. So first one I actually want to show you guys is the famous "I want you" for the U.S. Army. It's a very common picture we've seen used for World War II. It wasn't generally used for Vietnam, which we're talking about the draft today, but still something very similar in terms of recruiting and getting people to actually go out for the Vietnam War and actually want to do it. So that's something that we can understand as well. And then as a second visual aid, there's a study done a few years ago that showed boys and girls and Americans that the way they actually thought about the draft. And if we look at this here, it says, do you think the United States should return to the military draft at this time or not? We have the total here, boys in the middle and girls on this side. Almost ironically, girls were more likely to say, yes, we should return to the draft. But as you can see as well, most kids thought we should not return to the draft. And I'll kind of show that significance again throughout the speech here today, as you'll see. So without further ado, let's get right started. Al Franken famously asserted, the founders who crafted our Constitution and Bill of Rights were careful to draft a Constitution of limited powers, one that would protect Americans' liberty at all times, both in times of peace and at war. The draft is an institution of America that, unlike other issues of the hippie generation, has found itself at a standstill. Issues ranging from sexual expression to the use of certain drugs, you know who you are, have been solved in part, at least because such concerns have been brought to light. There hasn't been a better time for Americans to realize that the draft is simply unnecessary. Now, the draft, regardless of what generation you belong to, has and could very well be put into use again. This isn't to say that it's inherently bad, but rather, as we'll see, simply unnecessary. In looking into expert opinion, and of course how times have changed, I have the great opportunity to show you today how the draft has simply outlived itself. So, for the next few minutes, let's take a moment to explore first the problems perpetuated through the institution of the draft. Next, we'll examine some solutions that we can take to empower our nation and prevent the draft. While finally, we need to clarify what exactly the benefits are because of our conscious action of decision.
May I have some coffee?
So first, it's important that we understand the problems perpetuated through the draft. We need to understand how effective our current force actually is. So with the status quo, we see, according to the former Secretary of Defense, Melvin Laird, that the all-voluntary force has surpassed expectations. After more than a decade of sustaining combat operations in Iraq and Afghanistan while meeting other global expectations, our force has been successful by virtually every measure. The voluntary force is more intelligent, fit, committed, and representative more than ever. Moreover, it has proved more cost-effective than a draft force. So though there is a 3-year difference between Melvin Laird and the date that we're actually talking about this, our strategy hasn't changed in terms of being efficient and effective, as our former defense secretary mentioned. With an effective force that is smaller and efficient, we must realize the potential of our own capabilities. Yet, there's more to be done besides simply realizing our abilities. Now that we more thoroughly understand the problems associated with extending the draft, we need to figure out some solutions. The solutions are practical, including a justified slight increase of funding and a phase-out program for the selected service itself. So first, let's discuss funding. As I mentioned before, our strategy has been successful in ensuring a well-equipped army. Being equipped is important as our technology becomes ever more outdated, much like those who still use rotary dial phones. It's also beyond important that we include strict oversight over where exactly our defense money goes. Yet, as the New York Times reports, many defense experts, liberals and centrists, as well as hawks, agree that more investment is needed in maintenance, training, and modernizing aging weapons and equipment. Yet, the Pentagon and Congress have chosen to invest in excessively costly high-tech weaponry while deferring maintenance and other operational expenses. We need efficient spending, and we need to direct it more towards that of which is reaching age. our military maintenance. Yet, there is another solution that we must take into account today, and that is actually phasing out the selected service. It's important that we not be too hasty in immediately abolishing the selected service, its employees, and as such, its services. Now, that isn't to say that I'm in favor of extending a prolonged removal of the draft, as it's already been nearly 40 plus years. Instead, we should manage a 3-year phase-out program, as managed by congressional approval, will gradually remove responsibilities and those employed by the selected service, so as to have the agency completely removed by the year 2020. Giving the agency such a gracious amount of time will ensure employees have the time necessary to find new jobs and ensure for their own well-being, as that's important as well. As such, we're utilizing our time wisely and also phasing out the selected service that has failed to have been used for nearly 5 decades. As note, these are just 2 suggestions in solving the problem of the draft, and I believe there could be even more effective measures, yet through increasing our current spending by not much, I add, in addition to the phase-out program of the selected service, Americans can only benefit. Now we've taken a look at the solutions to our draft problem, let's examine the benefits because of our action. The benefits include assurance for generations to come and the upkeep of our democratic republic. So first, let's talk about the assurance of our youth. Congressman Mike Kaufman of Colorado reports that the draft will remove undue burden on our nation's young people. We need to get rid of the mean-spirited and outdated system and trust that if the need should arise, Americans, both male and female, will answer the call to defend our nation. We need to trust in our country's abilities as we have for the last couple of centuries. Our youth also need to know that as it has been since I was born 19 years ago, our nation is safe, and our military has the means to be effective and efficient, in part because it is a voluntary force. Now that's just one of the benefits. Another benefit is the government upkeep. Congressman Kaufman goes on to explain that agency activities cost taxpayers roughly $23 million each year. And a 2012 Government Accountability Office report questioned whether the system could even provide a viable list of draftees in a time of war. So the Defense Department, if needed, what exactly are we spending $23 million on? Bureaucrats to keep lists that, as the report mentioned, may be questionable as to its effectiveness. Folks, this is common sense. If you don't use your grandma's 40-year-old vacuum that is hogging space in your garage, get rid of it. Again, this is assured to go to the government employees, and that's not a bad thing per se. If we reduce the government expense to just $20 million a year, a great decrease, and use that by the number of years since the draft would have been around, that's nearly $800 million wasted. Our schools can use that money. Our infrastructure, our communities would benefit from government wastefulness, and that's what the opportunity presents us. The chance to take responsibility of our money and, of course, use it more wisely. With our benefits examined with diligence, let's consider the big picture at stake here if we continue to perpetuate the draft. So today, we took the great opportunity to further understand the problems caused by our perpetuated extension of the draft. Next, we obtained the chance to better understand some practical solutions, while lastly, in examining the benefits of our solutions, we now more thoroughly understand the draft and why it is that we must see that it's buried with all the other outdated issues of its time. Through what we looked at today and the information I've listed in the video below, we have a way to take action. In reality, we probably could just sit around for another few decades and let the selected service phase out itself. Yet, let's slim a part of our political institutions that is simply not necessary in this day and age. Sheldon Richman of the Future of Freedom Foundation said it best. In a free society, no one should be compelled to take up arms or be forced to kill or risk